Welcome, everyone. I am Krista Berry Ortega. I work on the Candid team. I don't think I've introduced myself yet. So I work on the Candid team with all these amazing folks. I mostly work with our funding information network partners. So this has been quite a special privilege and pleasure to be working with a CFI member and the Collaboratory team. And I was on the committee to plan this whole track. So what a pleasure, Yvonne, Dave, thank you for having me and working on this project this year, because it's been really nice to work with the community foundations. I'm going to hand this over to the folks that are going to lead our session very soon, but we do have a quick poll, and of course it's not ready. Give me 1 second. That we wanted to include you all in. And if you haven't used Slido before, I recommend using your phone. And you can go ahead and just download through the, what is this called? QR code? Or you can just join at slido.com and there's a number there. So we wanted to, get to know you a little bit more. And this is still a pretty intimate group, Sarah. So when I hand it over to you, you can ask even some more questions. We are also using the chat in Pathable, so I can't see it right now because I'm projecting my slides. But I think Steph is going to be posting a link to this if you want to use Slido in your computer. And so the question, hopefully you've had a chance to find it in the Slido Pathable. Yes, thank you. People are already there. We want to know what some of your challenges to collaboration are. That's really the key to this topic today with our amazing collaborators, Collaboratory. Look at all the collaboration words we're using. What are some of the challenges to collaboration? We want to know. Ego, I see someone saying ego. If you agree with ego, just type that in and it'll grow. And our presenters, if you want to join too, you're a part of the conversation too. Oh, I love that we can see participants typing. Time consuming. Letting ownership go. Ooh. Time. Mm-hmm.
The participants could give my presentation. This is fantastic.
Not enough time. I'm seeing time as a theme. Letting ownership go, I think I said, but maybe it grew. Logistics. Oh, yes. Data sharing. Huge. I would add trust, but I'm gonna just let you all keep adding to this. We've got more coming in. If you agree with one of them and you type the exact same way, it grows. It's kind of cool. Yeah, trust. Thanks for whoever agreed or added that. Time, ego. On the same page. Yes. Has everyone had a chance to participate? Oh, we got more. Good. Mm-hmm. Not enough time, buy-in, huge. Finding overlapping time, right? We're all a little stretched thin. Jason, the session earlier that you and Yvonne led reminded me how important slowing down can be in some of this work. And that was another theme that I took away from yesterday's session around asset framing is like, let's slow down and not take it all on. Differing work cultures and work styles, finding alignment. It's totally time consuming. You've got Sarah here that's going to share more about that with you, but also answer any questions that you have on the work that Collaboratory is doing. So what I'm going to do is invite you to continue to use this area because we set up a Q&A section in addition to this word cloud prompt where you can go in and as questions start to arise throughout our time together, feel free to put them in there. It's completely anonymous. And then it's kind of fun and interactive because you can like vote up if you like someone else's question, you can give it a little thumbs up and we'll have time for a little more of a formal Q&A at the end of today's session. But we wanted to just start by getting to know a little bit about where you're at with collaboration, and to have some opportunity for you to reflect as well. So I got to meet Collaboratory Jason and Sarah a couple months ago. I'm in the Miami area, and the stars aligned, and it worked out that Yvonne was in town and you all were on the east side of Florida from the west side of Florida, and somebody had a drink. And we had such an exciting conversation. I was kind of blown away by the work that you're all doing from a CFI member and from a community foundation perspective. I've always said if you've met one community foundation, you've only met one community foundation, but like you all are on like a whole nother level to the degree that community foundation isn't even in your name anymore. And so we were just so excited to figure out how we could continue this conversation with you, hear more about your journey, and gain some insights from the folks that are here with us in this space too, so we can all continue to do such inspiring and exciting work like you all are doing in the Fort Myers area. So Jason, Sarah, thank you so much for all your dedication to just showing up for the community and for us. And I'm handing it over to you. We can't wait to dive in.
Nice. You ready to go, Sarah?
Let's go.
So welcome, everyone. Super happy to have you here. Just a little frame setting to invite you into this conversation. Kristen mentioned it. We are a community foundation that's been on quite a journey. And today I'm super excited for Sarah Owen, our CEO of the helm over 10 years, to be able to share what that journey's been like and how we're moving forward. But before we do that, I want to prepare us for this conversation by sharing a really simple thought quote that the founder of the Southwest Florida Community Foundation, which is now in the Collaboratory, who started us 45 years ago, he has this saying and quote that we use, that one little idea can change the world, one little voice can begin a great cause. And his name was John Shepherd. And 45 years ago, he believed that a foundation can make an impact in a community like ours across the region. And now, as we start to think about how we're coming to our community in a very different and new way of thinking about solving problems, we're excited to share it with each one of you. And we're excited to invite you into this as yourself, right? Not only your title, but your lived experience as a father, a daughter, a sister, a cousin, a brother. Because one thing we do know is that for us to be able to achieve great things, we have to be 100% committed to being ourselves. And that's the only thing we can be. And so with that, I'm super excited to turn it over and introduce Sarah Owen, the CEO of Collaboratory. Sarah, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jason. So for those of you that may not know, Jason holds the role here of the nurturing lead. Whenever he speaks, I don't know about you all, I just feel nurtured by his words. So thank you for that. Even though I'm with him every day, it never fails, right? So that nurturing is so important on our team and out in the community. And I'll tell you a little bit more as why we think that's important. But before I jump in, I want to get a sense outside of the Candid folks. Is everyone, just do a thumbs up in your box or give me a thumbs up. Is everyone here with a community foundation? Because I want to be sure as I'm talking to colleagues, are you all community foundation folks? Is there anybody that isn't a community foundation person? All right, Sean, it looks like you.
And Sean's on the Candid team.
Oh,
but a different team.
I don't see any of your Candid branding stuff.
I know. I took
all right. All right.
Don't get him in trouble. Don't get him in trouble, Sarah.
I know.
That's all right. I'm used to seeing all the. I'm used to seeing all the Candid swag. So all right then. So it looks like we've got some community foundation folks and maybe some library folks. So I'll kind of lean towards that. So I'm going to spend just about 20 minutes with you sharing, explaining things, sharing something that we've been working on. And I think it said in the description, and it's really important for me to preface this before I share my screen, is this is just our experience. This is our truth. This is our journey. But it's been informed by all the work that people out in the field have been doing, and more importantly, what we've heard from the community and that kind of thing. So this is just one example. And my favorite time really is the question and answer, because then I get to hear from you. We changed this explanation session. We call it not a presentation because of feedback that we've received. Every single time we do it, we'll go back in there and tweak it. We call this one 2.0. We're working on 3.0. So I want to encourage you, even before we begin, that we want to hear everything, right? We want to hear that thing you're texting your friend, like, can you believe they've got some nerve saying this? That's the stuff we want to hear in the Q&A. And don't worry, you've got a nurturer here. If it gets really uncomfortable for me, I promise you I can take it. So I'll spend about 20 minutes with you through the presentation, but then at the end, we'll have time to talk with each other. All right. So I'm going to share my screen, and Jason, if you can just unmute and let me be sure to know that when I pull this up, that you can see this.
Yes. And just remind everybody, I think in the Slido app that there's, if you have questions that come along, you could drop those in there as well as we go through this. And we can see it, Sarah, you're good to go.
All right, I'm good to go then. All right, so welcome to Collaboratory, which we like to consider a state of mind. And I always just like, no matter where I am, just to give a moment of appreciation. I think anybody that will sit with us and have a conversation about this in their day, thank you for taking time out of your day, for joining this session and being with us. It really is a gift to us. So I said in my opening comments that we don't really call this a presentation, we call it an explanation session. So what is it that we're actually explaining here? Well, as Jason mentioned, we've been on a journey, and we want to share that journey with you, kind of where we are and where we think we've been going. I love that Jason started out with a quote from one of our founders. We were founded 45 years ago as a community foundation. But over the last decade, we've really been looking at what is it that we can bring every single day to the community and why. And we started exploring a decade ago on how we could better connect people. Any of you that are familiar with the field know that about a decade ago, 15 years ago, we all started looking like, what is our identity now as philanthropy's changed? How have we changed? And in 2018, we opened a physical space. The Southwest Florida Community Foundation opened the space and named it Collaboratory. It contained co-working spaces, meeting spaces, we did tours, and we really built it with one thing in mind. How do we better connect people? How do we better bring people together? And that was really our goal. But in February of 2020, now make a note of that date, 1 month before the pandemic struck, after opening the building, we began really exploring, are we really doing enough? When we get up in the morning, is this enough? And we began to find that people more identified with Collaboratory as the physical space than they ever had as Southwest Florida Community Foundation. We struggled with that community foundation thing, like, what is it? What do they do? I don't get it. But something about Collaboratory and the state of mind we were creating there around connectivity really began resonating with people. And so our team and our board began a multi-year journey to say, what more can we do to create change in our community? And how can we inspire people to dream bigger? So about 1.5 years ago, we publicly announced that we were changing our identity to Collaboratory. But more than that, we were naming the change that we wanted to see in our region. And we all went on a very public virtual Zoom with thousands of people and announced that we were committed to bringing Southwest Florida together to solve all of our social problems on an 18-year deadline. You read that correctly. You heard me correctly. All of them in 18 years, every single one. The very next question people began to ask us, I mean, the words were not out of our mouth and people were not putting in the virtual chat, how in the world would you ever do that? Well, we know as an organization, we could never do that. No singular organization in a region could. And if we could, we should have already done it. We've been in existence for 45 years. So we said, look, we don't have this all figured out because every person in our region, 1.5 million of you, are going to have to be involved. And we've got to use a highly inclusive approach to connect and coordinate all the innovators and problem solvers that we knew are out there. But why? Why would we do this? Did we just want to do a new brand or a new name change? Or, you know, hey, we were rolling into COVID. I mean, is this something we really wanted to do? Well, the catalyst for this was not branding. The catalyst for this was committed people who've been working for decades to try to solve big, difficult, stubborn social problems. And we're big on data. And we've been watching the data really closely for a decade. And we knew that despite all the great work being done in our region, the trends were still headed in the wrong direction. We'd given out millions and millions of dollars. We saw billions of dollars being pointed towards these problems, but everything we wanted to go up was going down. Everything we wanted to go down was going up. And honestly, we were just like, there's got to be more that we can do. Creating a building and creating connectivity wasn't enough, so we had to take it further. And when we looked at specific data points, which I know you all do in your own communities, we saw that the numbers that we had all as a region been working so hard to improve were really going in the wrong direction. Now, it's important for me to note that these were all pre-COVID numbers. And I don't know if you caught it in the intro, but Fort Myers, Florida, we just got annihilated by Hurricane Ian. So all of these trends are in worse condition than they've ever been, because since these data points, we've gone through a pandemic and now a devastating hurricane. So one of our counties in our region, Lee County, is just the example here, but we serve 4 other counties and their numbers are very much the same. And so we couldn't, as an organization, continue to look at these numbers going in the wrong direction and not do something different. But I made a joke when you all were in the slide. I was saying, oh, I think that you all could give my presentation because you work in this area. You know what the problems are. There are problems with our approach to solving problems. This is why the numbers keep heading in the wrong direction. First of all, what we discovered in all of our research before we announced our big idea and our big goal is we really began to understand that normally when I'd show a data slide like that in an audience or at an annual meeting or at a Rotary presentation, people would zero in on one. They'd be like, oh gosh, those numbers on hunger, we've got to do something about. So we always just try to pick one of these problems and then zero in on that, very much in a silo. But here's the reality. All of these problems are connected to each other, and all the effort we put in one, we can't solve for it because they're connected to others. I can tell you a few years ago, as a community foundation, we really started to take a look at economic opportunity. We're like, this is where it's at. If we can just solve for this, that'll do it. But what we quickly learned was economic opportunity is directly connected to public school strength. The strength of our public schools was connected to early childhood learning. Early childhood learning is connected to maternal health, and you just saw that number I shared with you on the data point of our very miserable progress of moms getting that prenatal care that they need. And maternal health here in our region was directly linked to transportation. There just were not transportation options for these pregnant moms to get to their OB/GYN appointments. And then if we just dive in a little bit deeper, one layer down, pick out public school strength, well, we know that's connected to the funding of public schools, that's directly connected to the state mandates, which is connected to voter apathy and civic engagement. And that takes all kinds of grassroots organizing, which community foundations would be a little hesitant to fund anyway. And that's all related back to economic opportunity because the people you're trying to reach are trying to work 3 jobs. So you cannot take a look at one problem without taking a look at all the others. And that was a big barrier we really believe we had to overcome as a community. Because there's not 100 different problems. There's one large entanglement with 100 entangled symptoms. And you'll hear me say this a lot. It's all connected. So what we did is we didn't want to talk philanthropy talk anymore. If you go to collaboratory.org and spend a little time there, I always ask people, if you see any philanthropy speak on there, please email me where it is so we can get rid of it. We said, instead of talking about frameworks and assessments and all of that kind of thing, how do we just communicate to people that the things they care about in their lives are connected to things that maybe they never even thought of? So we're saying things like dogs are connected to domestic violence, or buses are connected to babies. You know, instead of me talking a whole stream of consciousness around the transportation needs of a community and the data points, you'd be shocked when I tell people, hey, do you know that if you care about babies, if you would just fund transportation, we could move that needle so much faster? Showing people that voting is connected to early childhood education, that early childhood education is connected to nutrition, that nutrition is connecting to policing. You know, out in the community, these are not connections people readily make. We know that suicide rates are connected to broadband. Broadband is connected to poverty. And in our region, we're really big on tourism. And people were shocked to learn that we could inadvertently increase poverty when we increase tourism, because we're increasing lower paying wage jobs. Secondly, we discovered we're not well organized, to put it mildly. So any company, and even most nonprofits, they have some sort of hierarchy. Now, when I say hierarchy here, please know I'm not talking about power dynamics. I'm talking about organization. Like, one person knows what another person's doing. Marketing knows that they need to get their information to communications, or shipping knows it's got to send its report down the line to logistics. And we're used to operating like this in our companies and nonprofits. But let's take a look at our communities where all of us are working. We have got so many great organizations doing so much great work, but it's all designed in this really flat organizational chart. This one represents a portion of our region where we've got 3 health systems, 3 large community foundations, 3 United Ways, dozens of large nonprofits, hundreds of small nonprofits, police, courts, churches, government, state, local, federal, all running community programming and funding it. We've got a lot of retirees here, so we've got individual activists and leaders. We have more chambers of commerce than I can count. It's over 25. We've got big companies with social corporate responsibility departments. We've got 5 school districts, more economic development initiatives over the last few years than I can count, colleges and universities doing research, national nonprofits, and collaboration initiatives. We didn't invent collaboration. They're popping up everywhere, but not always successfully. But there's nothing and no one coordinating all this. Again, that question mark at the top isn't around control, but it's just who's going to begin linking all of the innovators, problem solvers, and great work that's happening. So we came to this conclusion by doing a lot of studying. We really wanted to look at where are other networks working? How's this worked in the past? How is it currently working? And we leaned heavily on the NASA example, NASA as coordinators. Now, I know you're thinking, well, NASA solves engineering and technology problems. You're right. So this is just an example of coordination. So in the Apollo program at its height, NASA was coordinating tens of thousands of different vendors, innovators, problem solvers. Each individual entity had to be a specialist at what they did. And remember, NASA didn't build any of this. They were just responsible for coordinating. Their ratio of coordinators to problem solvers was 1 to 40 to get a person to the moon and back in a decade. In our communities, that ratio is 0 to hundreds. We just don't have these mechanisms. Now, imagine for a minute if NASA hadn't existed in the space program. I'm telling you, they wouldn't have known if they were going to Mars or Jupiter. The scaffolding people wouldn't have known what the LEM was doing. It just would have never happened without some kind of coordinating entity, but we don't take that into account when we're trying to plan big things in our community. This also popped up in the slide out. There's no collective regional goal here. It doesn't allow each silo to do what they do well, but at the same time, dream up and organize up to something bigger. In fact, there's no regional goals at all. The other factor we've identified is we don't make big ideas turnover proof. I don't know how many of you all see this, but some great leader will step forward and start a collaborative initiative, and everybody joins, maybe not so much because they think the idea is good, but because of who the leader is. And they all come to the table and they gather once a month for breakfast and talk about it. But as soon as that leader leaves, what happens? That work is gone. I've been here a decade now, so it's long enough. So I now remember where I sit in a meeting and someone's like, I've got a great idea. And I kind of, under my breath think, yes, so did so-and-so 7 years ago. And that never got off the ground. So look at the tenures of people in law enforcement, healthcare, higher ed, and nonprofits. 3, 5.5, 6 years. When they're gone, a lot of times our efforts are gone as well. And that's because we haven't gotten the community involved. The community doesn't own it. An individual leader, a hero leader, or organization does. And then boy, in the slide of this one came up. Time, but nobody said money, because we don't think about investing. And more importantly, donors don't want to invest the money in the coordination. This got started a long time ago with that whole only, a penny of every dollar you give goes to overhead. And we've gotten all wrapped up in that, which means nobody has the time, plan, budget, or hope for making the time to work together in a coordinated way. It's complex, it takes a lot of time, and we just don't plan for it. And then I love that the first thing that came up in the Slido was ego, because guess what? It's everywhere. And I notice in the nonprofit and community work world, we don't face it head on, we don't plan for it. We smile nicely at the meeting, and then we go have the meeting in the parking lot, or we're texting each other in the meeting about how stupid the idea is and that it'll never work. We've started a thing in our meetings where at the end of the meeting in our coalition building, we say, all right, we're going to spend 10 minutes having the conversation you were planning to have in the parking lot. And this is a big part of Jason's role as a nurturer, is really taking a look at about how that can be different, both on the front end, in the midst of it, and then in an evaluative kind of way, because we're not alone in this. All of these things are happening in every community in America, every city, every county, and every single region. So what do we need to do about it? Well, that's what we ask ourselves. Once we identified the problem, when we were planning for Collaboratory and in this new form, we said, what does it look like? What are we going to have to do? And we came up with 6 principles: building trust, sharing meaningful data, committing to a holistic regional goal, coordinating, funding that coordination, and really working to make it turnover proof. So we were like a lot of community foundations, small to medium size, giving out $6 million annually. And that did a lot of great work. I'm not diminishing that. I was part of all of that, proud of what it did, but the data just revealed we had to do more. So we're in the process of transforming into a sophisticated convening and coordinating apparatus. At Collaboratory, we don't build things, we coordinate the builders. And we divided up departments in order to do this, to those things, to match those principles. What is it going to take to really address these problems we've identified in collaboration and problem solving? So we have a givers and giving department, because we've got to fund the heck out of this. We've got an explanation department, and actually you're experiencing this right now. We do these at least weekly and will until we meet our goal, because we believe that every single person in this community has the right to tune in whenever they want to learn about how they can be involved. We owe that. Rather than announcing some big initiative, doing a big kickoff, explaining it once and moving on with the work, we will talk about it over and over again so we can learn. The entanglements department is really focused on that connectivity I shared with you and really examining that, mapping it, figuring it all out. The brainstorming department is about hearing from the community. What do we need to learn? The ideas are out there. We just have to stop and take the time to learn about them. And then, as you all experienced as we kick this off, the nurturing department that's really focused on that ego and backbiting piece of work and healing, a lot of healing that has to happen in our communities. Now, for those of you that are community foundations, if you look at these descriptors, I'm not sure you would describe your boards in this way, but we understand that our organization's got to be highly experimental, highly imaginative, have a learn as we go attitude, a really high tolerance for the unknown, and a high tolerance for failure. And that was a big part of our board's work, to really begin to get comfortable with this after decades and decades of serving in more traditional nonprofit settings. If you want to learn more and dive in deeper, and I also know those position descriptions for all of these things like explanation lead and nurturing lead are all in the files, so you can kind of see a little bit more how we talk about them and how we activate them in our work. Just go to collaboratory.org. And we welcome you, along with anybody else that wants to be involved, to the greatest community problem-solving initiative in American history. And we don't feel embarrassed to say that. So let's talk.
Oh, I love that, Sarah. It feels like it's time now for the yeah buts, the how abouts, the what ifs, right? So please come off air. You're more than welcome to ask the question out loud.
Hi, Sarah. I'm Jeff Vega. I am with the Princeton Area Community Foundation in New Jersey. I will readily admit that when you started your presentation, in my head, I said, what? Huh? And even saying that, I will say that I've been with my community foundation now for 8 years. And I was recruited 8 years ago because prior to 8 years ago, I spent 22 years of my life with an organization by the name of New Brunswick Tomorrow, a city in New Jersey, that did exactly that. All our job, and it was so difficult to explain our mission because we weren't a community foundation, we weren't like anybody else, but we were a convener. We brought people together from all walks of life in the city to just sit together, talk about the problem, talk about a solution, and then my job was to go out, get the money to go do it, and then to figure out a way to how to sustain it. So I was happy doing that for 22 years. Then the recruiter came knocking on the door, told me about the vision that the board at the time had of the community foundation here of wanting to move beyond being a transactional bank type of community foundation and leading for impact. And it's been a wonderful journey so far of 8 years. And it's almost been an experience where some trustees, it's like, be careful what you ask for because you're getting it. And we are on that same journey that you've described. You are way down the road than we are, but we're in the middle of our third strategic plan under my leadership. We've begun to encounter all of those issues that you talked about how to the roadblocks with collaborating and with egos and with being in a region where there's such a segregation of wealth and poverty. And so I just want to ask you a couple questions. It's like, what, as you transformed into this model, what did you stop doing as a community foundation?
So I love your recruitment story. It's very similar to mine. I didn't want to come to work for a community foundation. Oh, we're recording this. Oh, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to. I didn't want to come to work for Community Foundation because I honestly, from an outsider, thought it was boring and nothing really happened. I saw them as a very transactional type of organization, and I just didn't get it. And very much when I was recruited, I said the same thing. I said, we're going to have a lot of moments over the years, if I make it, where you're going to say, oh, I didn't know that's what you meant. Because coming into the job, I said, this could be so much more. This could mean so much more. This could change so much more. And that board got on board with that thinking. So this, up till this point, has been almost 11 years now. And so the first things we did was we went from the no foundation to the yes foundation. I mean, we had more rules.
I love that.
I mean, if you wanted to give us money, man, you had to work really hard at it. Like, we had 4 funds and there was a minimum of $8 billion to open it. And you had to pay this, and we close our doors at 3 because we have to catch up on, I mean, it was just like, no, no, no. If you called and tried to do anything unique or out of the box, no, 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 no. So at the time I said to my CFO, our team, I said, if we can't lose our 501c3, if I won't get arrested, and it's not unethical or immoral or anything to do with hate, we're saying yes, because we've got to just be known as problem solvers. So we just started saying yes, 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 yes. Now that is not the best now because so many things we said yes to, we're like, oh, great. Okay. But we had to, right? So then we started with that, and then we moved quickly into changing the way we fund, changing operating rather than programmatic, trying to begin to change donor behaviors, trying to look at investing in ourselves. Another moment that was really sketchy is when I asked to take $500,000 out of unrestricted and reinvest it in ourselves. That one almost did me in. But it reaped benefits. When I got here, I think our assets under management were about 45 million, and now we're nearly at 200. And this is the only time you'll hear me or anybody in our organization or on our board talk about assets, because we never speak of them. We only speak about the work that happens as a result of those assets. So we got rid of all of that kind of talking.
Are you still opening up donor advised funds?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We love them. Come on over, and anybody can open one. And we still, in that way, are yes, we still open field of interest funds. We're still working with professional advisors. So we kind of see it as 2 circles. So here's the traditional community foundation work: scholarships, donor advised fund, field of interest fund. And we will never shrink that. That will always stay there. It's at the core of who we are. And we're building a bigger circle around it to support it and to expand it. So it went through these stages of transformation. It wasn't like we were a very transactional organization up until February 2020 and then jumped into Collaboratory. I mean, even this building has a huge story behind it. It's in a developing neighborhood called Midtown. It was a 1920s train depot that needed to be restored. We used a new market tax credit deal where at one point they were risking losing $5 million. I just got them used to risk, like risk and risk and risk and risk, which means you have to get used to failure and failure and failure. So it's more of a state of mind than it is any singular thing that we did.
And I have to ask this question. It's a silly one, but I know in my experience with community development and community change, I've seen nothing get groups stuck more than a name change. How do your board, the community, react to just dumping the Community Foundation name out and adopting this name?
It was a whopper, but here's the thing. We had already named the building that. And everybody thought it was the stupidest name ever. Nobody will ever know how to pronounce it. Nobody will ever know how to spell it. Nobody's going to understand what it meant. The building was open a year and a half from 2018 to mid 2019, and more people knew what Collaboratory was than had ever understood what the Southwest Florida Community Foundation was. I would turn on the news in the morning, And they just use it as a noun and a verb. Oh, today at Collaboratory, or this week at Collaboratory. And it wasn't difficult for people to grasp. So naming the building first helped, because then it proved out that what we ended up with unknowingly was two competing brands. We had the Community Foundation brand actually competing against the Collaboratory brand. And suddenly we were left trying to explain both of them. No one thought the Collaboratory would ever gain any traction. They wouldn't even let us put signs on the building for like a year, because they're like, this is never going to work.
Can I ask you with, and I'm sorry, I know I may be controlling here, so please raise your hand so I can shut up see if you want to speak. But I find this fascinating. How much, with going up to almost $200 million in assets, how much of that is your discretion, and how much staff do you have can be supported with doing this work?
So we continue to pull from our unrestricted to reinvest in ourselves. So to signal a true commitment to this. All right, so think about it. We didn't just put like an extra box on our website to say, we're going to start coalition building and collaboration. And you'll hear in the next segment an existing very successful coalition that was being built within this last decade as well. So we didn't just put like a little initiative together. We went all in, and the board invested $2.6 million from unrestricted to point towards all the branding, all the advertising and collateral, hiring new positions. So they went all in. I mean, you don't put up a website that says, welcome to the greatest problem solving initiative in American history.
Not put up, yeah.
And you got to go all in. We sent mailers. We sent these giant mailers to tens of thousands of people when we announced, like, they're so big they didn't fit in people's mailboxes. Like, it was a really deliberate, intentional shake. So we just keep pulling money out of unrestricted and reinvesting in ourselves. We don't have a lot of unrestricted dollars. The biggest thing here is going to be, can we change donor behavior? Will donor behavior change to support the coordination? Now we have a unique situation because we now have to coordinate the recovery of an absolutely devastated situation. We had 15 of the top CEOs from the top companies and corporations in our one of our rooms today for the second week in a row, and committed to long-term both investing and participating in Collaboratory will be coordinating a big part of the recovery.
Wow.
So they get coordination in that way. I don't know if we would have gotten them to the table as quick.
Right.
Just saying we're going to coordinate the solving of all the social problems.
How are you planning to, because I could only imagine you can't continue to pull out of reserves. How do you, what's the sustainability? I hear you changing donor behavior. Is that going to be fast enough to create a sustainable approach to this?
No. So we keep going with the small circle. We've got development people opening donor advised funds, talking to donors, doing all of our more traditional work. And this circle has to grow. And so we have another thing called the billionaire strategy. And we've had some pretty significant thought leaders come alongside of us that know billionaires. And now it's going to be pitching to billionaires this idea to see if they'll come with us.
Okay.
If they won't, this is going to fail.
Yeah. So in your geography, you do have the billionaires, the potential to create.
No, they're not from here.
Oh, okay.
This
Maybe
is
they have
billionaires
homes.
who just are saying, like, okay, I'm sick of problems not being solved.
Got it.
Who's got a big idea, And look, I'm not a big peacock community foundation. I'm not one of the mega community foundations. I'm not running in those circles. So people have to introduce us.
Yeah, we're not that much bigger than you are. When I took over 8 years ago, we were at 107, and now we're at about 260.
Yeah, that's
So-
that's fantastic. Showing that what you're doing is working.
I don't want to continue to monopolize it. It's
No,
just
but
fascinating.
call me if you want to
I'd
call
love
me.
to. I'd love to
Yeah,
call
call
you.
me offline and we can connect. And I'm happy. I'll come visit. You
Oh,
better yet
wonderful.
come
Oh,
see it.
awesome. That would be awesome. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I had a question. So, yeah, I've been working. I've been calling it collaborative systems change as a kind of a way to take on these big complex problems. And I've also been looking at building tools over the years of like, how do you coordinate all these resources? So I'm wondering given there's hundreds, if not thousands of these projects and initiatives taking place in a community, how do you keep track of the landscape of what is happening and the interactions between those, I just call them projects for now, but across those projects, and then coordinate them in a way that can be done so efficiently with the use of time and resources. So there might be certain tools you're using or approaches that you're keeping an eye on this activity and understanding those relationships.
Yes, 100%. We're all about systemness is a word that you'll hear us use. What's the systemness of all of this? But we don't talk like that at all. So we talk about teams. So you'll hear in a few minutes the success of a workforce team. We're using the word coalition, and I really want us to use the word teams. We're getting there, like what we're doing is we're standing up teams of people. The workforce team, we don't fund individual organizations anymore to do programs. We fund backbones for these coalitions now. So we're going to be standing up a health and wellness coalition, which suddenly means we're not the only people in town backboning things. That now we're going to fund coordinators in other organizations that are backboning. So we're starting to create a culture of this instead of everybody depending on one or two organizations to do it. So we've got the next launch will be health and wellness, which will be really around the social determinants of health. So you can imagine the hundreds and hundreds of partners that'll come to that table. And then also on housing is our next one. And then we've got smaller ones forming on immigration and the climate. And so the idea is to spend 3 to 5 years getting the coalitions operating as a network. None of these will be nonprofits. They'll all be networks. We believe in the future of the institutions is not institutions, but networks within communities. So we have to get these networks operating in a healthy way. You'll hear the example again in a minute. We've got a proven example. And then you begin to link the coalitions together. So we got to spin up these coalitions with goals that they're working on, right? Our workforce one is 55% of all working age adults will have a college degree or industry recognized certification by 2025. And we're moving towards that goal. But look, we can't go any further with workforce until we solve for housing. And we can't go any further with housing until we address the social determinants of health. They're all connected. So we're beginning to build these networks, and then we'll connect the networks. And we're looking at what does it look like for the data systems to support that. And luckily, we found a really great partnership with our state chamber, who's doing a lot of this data collection already. And we're working with them and a few other partners around these dashboards of data and measuring the results. Now, look, our goal is 18 years, but we know we've got to hit milestones along the way. We can't just say, check back in. And well, now it's 17 years. Check back in 17 years. That won't work. We have to be measuring what's working and what's failing. So yes, a lot of complexity in there around what has to be created that everybody will use. Because if we create it, nobody will use it. It's got to come within those coalitions.
Thank you, Sean, for that question, and Sarah for that answer. I want to make sure that we stay on time because there's a lot of amazing people that are going to be sharing stories today in all these sessions. And so I dropped a video in the Pathable chat. This is a video that talks about our coalition building that Sarah mentioned, our team building, and how this became a really point of view of how we're looking at getting to our 18-year goal. And as always, go to the collaboratory.org website. You can find all of our information there. Reach out to me if you need to coordinate an opportunity to come down or to chat with us, or as well as Sarah, if you have any questions around this work that we're doing. So appreciate you all and so happy that you were here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah and Jason.